Welcome to the New Kind of Man podcast. And today on the podcast is Aaron Hale. Aaron Hale is a man who has quite an inspirational story, and he has spent time in the service. And we're going to hear all about what happened before that, during that, and then since. And you are going to be inspired by Aaron's story. So, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And what I'd like to do, just as we kind of enter into the podcast, is just give a little bit of your backstory, maybe your family that you have now, and then where you grew up.
Well, I'm a Ohio native, Ohio State Buckeye fan. I grew up living a pretty vanilla Norman Rockwell life in rural Ohio. But I grew up without much hardship or anything that makes a really compelling backstory. but I also didn't have that pressure to excel. And I didn't have much ambition or drive or anything. I went to college because that's what I was supposed to do. But I had this picture of college that I got from Animal House, and within about 3 semesters, it was a mutual thing. I knew I wasn't supposed to, and the university didn't want to invite me back. So
it wasn't. You have to actually do schoolwork when you go to college. It isn't just Animal House and parties. Is that what you're saying?
I literally forgot where my classes were. Yeah, it was pretty bad. So I just pissed away a lot of my tuition money, and it was one of those serious life kick in the pants, come to Jesus moments where you go, I gotta do something with my life. I just got kicked out of college for being dumb or just being lazy, and it was I needed to change the venue. I needed to change my mindset. I needed to find some goals, discipline, direction. I needed a mission, and that's when I decided that I would join the military to get all of that plus the GI Bill, so that I could continue my education, this time with all the proper standards and principles of leading a full and complete life. So at the time, I've always been I've always been a cook. My family has this creative gene. My mom and my brother are incredible artists, and it actually goes back further in our family. But my creative talent led me into the kitchen, and I was cooking since I could reach over the counter. Now, God bless my mom for being my guinea pig growing up. But I wanted to be a chef, and I decided that when joining the Navy that I would be a Navy cook, and I didn't have any misconceptions or any ideas other than I'd be cooking in a huge ship's galley with these, the vats the size of Volkswagens, cooking mashed potatoes for the troops. But I was going to get some on-the-job training, and I was going to get that GI Bill. Well, within 2 years of leaving basic training, I was cooking for a 3-star admiral on the 6th Fleet Commander's flagship in Gaeta, Italy, and I was actually cooking really, it was real food for.
How did you get that gig?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I was traveling all around Europe, learning fine cuisine, cooking for dignitaries, royalty in some cases, and it was fantastic. But about this was around 2004, 2005 time. The war, both wars were in full swing.
Mhm.
And we were now floating around the Mediterranean, going to battle stations. It's still the flagship, and we're still home ported in Italy, and just for the most part, we're just doing figure eights out in the Mediterranean. But I felt at that time that I needed to do something a little more direct. I'd begun learning the discipline, and I'd gotten those things that were important personally, like the selfish goals. But along the way, it also picked up a far stronger sense of patriotism,
Mhm.
sense of duty, and so the selfless service, and I wanted to be there on the battlefield. So once I got back to stateside, uh, I volunteered to become an individual augmentee, or basically a sailor filling army roles over in Afghanistan. And I went and still a cook, so they put me as the NCYC of a army chow hall in the middle of Afghanistan. But that's when I met some EOD technicians, and I'd never uh, known about this, but EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, is the
Mhm.
military's bomb squad. And I met these guys. I learned all about what they did. They're first responders on the battlefield. They do everything, unexploded ordnance to IEDs, car bombs, you name it. Anything from bullets to nuclear bombs. These are the guys that go out, and when everybody's running away, they run into the fray.
Mhm.
And I uh, was immediately hooked. That's what I wanted to do.
So part of your story, starting out with just as growing up where you did, and with not a whole lot of expectations, is what you said, Aaron, and then going through, just sounds like you're just kind of not a whole lot of resistance. What was the switch? Like, I know that you went into the Navy to basically uh, to serve and kind of get away, and then to reset. It sounds like you matured some, but really, what was the catalyst that made you shift to think differently, or even to live differently after that? Because even the being a cook, while it's honorable and it's in the service, it's a part of the service. It's necessary and it's great. But yet, what was the catalyst that ultimately led you to say, no, I don't want to just do this. I want to go a step further to then to go out and then deploy with the Army folks, even while you're taking care of the chow hall. What was that? Because I think there's a transition there before the EOD transition. What was the catalyst there?
I found that the military is really good about placing you in challenging positions,
Mm.
even though I'd not joined a combat arms role. I was quickly, even from the first days in basic training, I was placed in leadership positions, and I was quickly advanced in rank and in responsibility, almost every time before I felt I was ready. And each time I was challenged to do and be better. And I found that, and this is one of the earliest, looking back, this is one of the earliest lessons I've learned, is that uh, there's no growth without challenge. There's
That's right.
there's there's no success without struggle.
Hmm.
And uh, that's what I was doing. I was finding that if I was becoming complacent, if I was becoming comfortable, that I wasn't challenging myself, and I needed to move on. When I said, I really enjoyed being a Navy cook. I really enjoyed cooking for the Admiral, and being stationed in Italy for 4 years is is absolutely incredible. But hardship duty, it is not.
Hmm.
Uh, it was an incredible learning experience, but I saw a better way to serve my nation,
Hmm.
and I saw a challenge. in volunteering to do something outside my comfort zone.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that you had to have been a really good cook, because I was lower enlisted Navy, and let me just tell you, I think that's where they put the people who didn't necessarily know how to cook, and so they prepared food, but the food wasn't that palatable. So if you got up to the point where you're actually feeding a 3-star, I would say that is, that says a lot about your cooking ability. Um, and yet it's such a drastic thing. I think there's something that's really valuable what you said, Aaron, because to me, my opinion is every man, in order for them to grow, they have to face adversity. They have to walk in it and walk through it the best they can. And sometimes that adversity is very, it's very potent. Sometimes it does, it changes us literally, like you've been physically changed because of the adversity that you walked in. But yet I think it's compelling too, because you realize that even within your growth, that now at least, that you see that a man has to see that adversity, and the only way that he can grow is by walking through it. And I think there's something happening now with just manhood generally, is men are walking away from that adversity, and they think that it's easier, and everything about, the culture around us is promising that it's easy, and yet you chose the hard way. And I thank you, sir, for your service, and I thank you for all that you have sacrificed for it and for us and for freedom's sake. But as you continue on now, just taking the journey now, you had gone from a Navy cook, and now you are transitioning into Afghanistan. Now you're in charge of a chow hall. What was that transition like for you to become an EOD? Because that too it seems like a progression, because I know where you're going, but yet for the listener, they may not know.
Well, just transitioning from cooking for the admiral and 25 of his staff to cooking for 700 NATO troops was a bit of a culture shock. But also running a kitchen full of Afghan local national cooks, it was an adventure. But there was just something when these EOD technicians that I'd first met talked about how difficult it was to get through the school, and the attrition rate, and how tight-knit the brotherhood is on the other side, and the fact that they get to save lives on the battlefield. And something just clicked. There was no doubt about it in my mind. So I put in a request to, in the Navy, they call it striking over, changing jobs. And the Navy promptly said no. I guess they liked my cooking too much.
Yeah.
But I'd had in my mind that once I'd finally got my first confirmed kill with an egg roll, I decided I was going to save lives instead. But then my contract was nearing its end, and I'd have to decide whether I was going to re-enlist again or get out. So once I returned from my first deployment to Afghanistan, I let my contract run out, and I went over to the Army recruiter, and I just handed them my service record from the Navy, and I said, I'm going to go EOD. And the soldier said, welcome aboard, sailor. I changed uniforms. I got to keep my rank, so I joined the Army as a sergeant. And I went through an abridged version of basic training, less yelling, all of the book stuff, the basic skills and all that. And then went to EOD school. It's about a year-long training, and I became an EOD technician.
I can tell you, there is no way in the world I could have been an EOD technician. There is no way. I remember going when I was in the Navy and working on a flight deck, working on on the flight deck of the carriers and deployments. And they said, this is the most dangerous, this is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. And all of that. And it was dangerous, but it really, as long as you kept your head on a swivel, we weren't really in any danger unless you were stupid. And then I actually started to hear about EODs and doing stuff like that. I was like, no way. Give me the flight deck every day. I want no part of being an EOD. What you guys did was extraordinary.
Thank you. It's funny you'd say something like that because I keep thinking, I joined EOD because I was too much of a sissy to become a fireman.
I don't know. I think I could blow stuff up a lot
It's all
easier
about
than I could take it apart.
it's all about perspective, right?
That's right.
And it's true. It may be a dangerous job, and there's no way there's no way to make what we do safe.
Right.
But if you pay attention to what you're doing and you train hard, you study your business, you can mitigate the risk.
Hmm.
And it was funny. A friend of mine once sent me a link. There was a poll of the top list of scariest jobs in the world, and one was like number one was soldier, number three was bomb squad, number two was high rise window washer. So if the chocolatier thing doesn't work out, I'm gonna get by a squeegee and get a hat trick.
Please do. You apparently have the courage for it, so I don't know. I'm not going to stop you. You may want to consult with Michaela first. I'm not really sure. I'll leave that up to you. So,
Well, I don't think I'm afraid of heights anymore.
so when you gone through the EOD training, how many years did you actually serve active duty EOD?
I was in the Army for 6 years.
Okay. So 6 years you went in as an E5. That's just a regular sergeant, right? The E5.
But there was a promotion in there. So when I was finally medically retired, I was E6.
Awesome. And so 6 years as an EOD, and from whatever depth that you're comfortable with talking about it, tell us about what happened and the events that were surrounding December 2011.
Well, by then I was on my second deployment as an EOD technician. It's my second time to Afghanistan. One time to Afghanistan, one time to Iraq in between, and this time I'd reached when we kind of believe is the pinnacle of the EOD world is becoming a team leader. EOD teams, at least in the Army, run in sets of three. There'll be two team members and a team leader. And it's the team leader that's the one that puts on the bomb suit, does that long walk down towards the explosive item. Because you want the most experienced, the most trained, the longest in the tooth, one to be performing the job. So I was, on my first deployment as a team leader, and we were in the Zaray district, which is part of the Kandahar province. We're not far outside of Kandahar, and my team was in a small village called Sia Choi. The Zaray district is what the Russians used to call the heart of darkness. It's the actual birthplace of the Taliban. Okay. And Sia Choi, I asked an interpreter what Sia Choi means, and he says, I think that means cemetery. Wow. So like, great, we're in Tombstone.
Exactly. Wow.
But it was extremely busy. We worked. We definitely earned our pay on that deployment. For 8 months straight, we were running post-blast scenarios where IEDs had taken out armored trucks or whatnot, and I do CSI type collection, measuring of the craters and that kind of stuff, um, or be called in on an IED that was located and mitigate the risk, collect the evidence, and destroy the rest. Um, and About 8 months in, I was just off of my 2 weeks of R&R. Every year-long deployment, you get 2 weeks vacation time off the battlefield, and I had just gone back home. Got to see my firstborn turn 1. I got to have Thanksgiving with the family. Even got to see my dad, my son's grandfather, dress up like Mickey Mouse for his birthday. So, and knowing my dad, that's like a once in a lifetime thing. So it was a. I call that the best last page in the photo album ever.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just getting back into it was back in my team truck that picked me up from the airfield, threw my luggage in the back of the truck on top of the robot, and we start heading back towards our command outpost. And along the way, uh, the convoy commander calls back to EOD and says, "Hey, there's something in the up ahead on the side of the road. Can you take a look?" And even though it wasn't actually our area of operations, we were the EOD team, we were first responders. This is what we do. So of course, they set up security cordon all the way around. They had local, they had the Afghan police that I guess had detected it or called it in. And we got to work. We set up our safe area. My team members started getting charges ready and set the robot out. And the robot discovered what we always saw 98% of the time was just a jug full of homemade explosives connected to a 9-volt battery and a pressure plate. So the robot ripped out the pressure plate, effectively severing the circuitry, but it couldn't get the jug out of the hard packed dirt. And I wanted to get some more evidence. I wanted to make sure we did everything we could to send, because we take evidence and we literally, biometrics, electronics, chemical analysis. We do all this so that we can catch these guys, the bomb makers, the financiers, all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to, if I could do it safely, I was going to get as much as I could off of this thing before I blew it up or bipped it, blow in place. So I jumped out of the truck. I started making my way towards it. I had a metal detector in one hand, and I had my evidence kit in the other, at about 20 or 30 yards from the original IED. A secondary device detonated. And it hadn't yet been discovered. And just about the same time, my metal detector was trying to tell me something really important. I get the mule kick from hell. I get sent into the air. I land on my knees and elbows, and the lights go out. I thought my helmet had just been pushed over my face because the blast was so hard. So I first did the functions test to wiggle the fingers and toes and knees and elbows and all that, and seemed to be all in order. So I reached up to fix my helmet and get back to work, only to find out that the helmet was gone. And that's when I thought, oh no, this is bad. The Army's going to want that back.
They always want it back.
The crap that goes through your head. And that was literally what I thought. Like, man, I better not lose that thing. But I also realized that something was really wrong. I couldn't see, and there was nothing blocking my vision. So what's supposed to happen in scenarios where the team leader goes down is that the team members are supposed to clear a safe path. So up to me. So medics can get to me, but I was still ambulatory. My legs still worked.
Mm.
So I got up and I started, kind of look like a zombie walk with my hands out in front of me, trying to find
Mm-hmm.
my way back to the truck. Who knows? I could have been stepping on another ID. I don't even know where the
Yeah.
truck really was anymore. But I didn't want my team coming in.
Mm-hmm.
For all I knew, they were just chasing me around like some kind of Benny Hill sketch.
And
But
what could you hear at that point? I know you couldn't see anything. What could you hear? Did the percussion like temporarily deafen you, or what was going on there? Could you hear their instructions, the rest of your team?
well, they were coming from a little ways off.
Okay.
But both my eardrums were blown,
Okay.
perforated. But I wasn't deaf. I I could hear. I mean, it was ringing tinnitus.
Mhm.
I had my bell rung,
Sure.
um, but I still had sound. It just wasn't very good at the time.
Mm.
Um, but my team finally they grabbed me, dragged me back to the safe area. Medics came running up from their outside the cordon. Uh, Medevac choppers were there in like 14 minutes because we were just coming from Kandahar.
Mm-hmm.
And within 48 hours, I was at Walter Reed. And
Wow. 48 hours from Afghanistan to the United States in 48 hours.
and that was only because they sent me to Landstuhl and wanted to keep me for 24 because of the swelling in my brain. They wanted to make
Hmm.
sure I could survive the transatlantic flight. So they probably could have got me there quicker. Uh,
Wow. Yeah, for those of you who are listening right now and you're not tracking with that part, that is incredibly fast. Usually that's not how it happens. You don't go from the battlefield right into Walter Reed into, a stateside hospital. Usually you end up going to Germany, Italy, you go somewhere else for an amount of time before you ever get into the States. So 48 hours is drastic to go from the battlefield explosion to a hospital bed stateside is really a phenomenal thing.
well, what had happened? The blast uh, had it hit me from miraculously didn't come from directly below me.
Hmm.
I don't know. They were the the bomb placers are not the bomb makers,
Mm.
uh, and sometimes these guys aren't the brightest.
Hmm.
They learned that our metal detectors pick up the batteries, and everything else is pretty much invisible under the
Hmm.
ground. So they'll take these 9 volts and they'll stretch the battery out around like far like they'll set it they'll offset it from the
Hmm.
IED.
Hmm.
And sometimes they just move the pressure plate too, or and there's no rhyme or reason to some of these guys.
Hmm.
But somehow I stepped. I don't even know if I stepped. I'm pretty sure I stepped on a pressure plate, but the blast came from my right side, and it blew up both my eardrums.
Hmm.
It actually blew out my right eye.
Hmm.
It fused the eyelids together, so I was doing like a permanent wink.
Hmm.
Um, a piece of frag had gashed directly across the bridge of my nose, and then put a gash in my left eye. And the doctors were in a hurry to see if they could save it.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, um, after a couple surgeries, they found that the new sight was coming back. So I lost both my eyes. Um, I'd also cracked my skull in several locations, to the point where I was leaking spinal fluid right out of my nose.
Wow.
Um,
At one point, did you was there any point in that you gave up? Or because
Sorry.
I think I said, was there any point in that you gave up? Because I think a lot of people, given that situation, and obviously the 48-hour time frame, and now you're in Walter Reed, I think a lot of other people, honestly, just even good men, I think would just kind of throw their hands up and say, screw it, it's over. I don't know what else to do. It's like, you know, almost like giving up on life, because that's a really drastic thing. And I realize you haven't given up on life. Since then, you've done some incredible things. You've ran marathons, you've climbed mountains, you've solo whitewater kayaked. I mean, you've done some amazing things. But in that moment, was there a sense of powerlessness, or did you already have the resolve to overcome this in that moment?
It would be a lie to say that there weren't weak times. You know,
Mm,
every once in a while, those demons, they're always just outside. The
mm,
what ifs, the why me's,
mm-hmm,
that self-defeat, the feeling of being a victim.
mm,
They're always out there if you let them come in. Uh, and I could have fallen down that shame spiral. But I have an incredible family. My younger brother is 6 years younger than me, and he was in a tragic highway collision. He used to work highway, like road construction, and was hit by another construction worker on the site, and
wow.
was uh, permanently um, injured.
Mm,
So, and he underwent like it was 6 months of recovery with
mm,
permanent brain damage, spinal injuries, and all that. And so, my mom was by his bedside that entire time, and she came into Walter Reed like this is not her first rodeo.
mm,
Same with my sister, who was actually a pediatric ICU nurse,
mm.
and she was there, like taking over Walter Reed. She was telling the doctors what to do. She was translating all the jargon for us,
That's
and
helpful.
then it's just cracking the whip. So it was, I wasn't allowed to be sorry for myself,
Mm,
and by then, um, I'd taken on these roles. I was a father. I was a son.
mm,
I was I'm the eldest brother of a sergeant in the army, a staff
mm,
sergeant, and team leader of in a job that requires that you step up.
mhm.
So there I was in a difficult situation, and it didn't take me long to snap out, to kick back those demons.
Mm.
And I was sitting in the hospital bed at Walter Reed, thinking, if I'm going to be blind, I'm going to be the best damn blind person I can.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and that's how I got started. I started researching. They taught me how to learn, use the what was it, the voiceover uh,
Mhm.
in accessible computers and iPhone and all that. And
Yeah.
I started researching blind plus running, blind plus
Mm.
skiing. A few names kept popping up, like Eric Weinmeier is the first blind person to climb Mount Everest. So I found him and I went mountain climbing with him. And
It's
when
awesome.
we did, I joined an all wounded veteran team led by Eric Weinmeier, not a veteran himself, but his dad is a former Marine.
Mm.
And uh, on the anniversary of his Everest ascent, he takes a team of wounded veterans up a mountain. And in 2013, we went up an 18,000 foot peak in the Peruvian Andes.
Wow.
There was a guy named Lonnie Bedwell, who was a blind uh, Navy guy who is the first blind person to kayak the entire Grand Canyon.
Wow, that is intense.
And I went kayaking with him. We've done the Yellowstone River a couple times, some other places. And just, I started surrounding myself with people who've already done it.
Yeah.
And I found that no matter what the hardship, we have the capacity to overcome. No matter what life throws at us, we can handle it. One of the things I always talk about is it, being EOD. We're each one of those 3-person teams gets an entire shipping container full of tools, bomb suits and hazmat kits and robots, you name it, power tools. And we get sent out to like Afghanistan, and we get this armored truck. It's not quite as big as a shipping container. So we got to leave some tools behind. We pick all the most important tools we think we need to get the job done, and we cram every corner of that truck full of as many tools as we could possibly need. And then we found ourselves in Afghanistan on dirt-packed goat trails that couldn't support any vehicles. So now it's what we could carry on our backs, and we left the rest of the tools behind. We ended up doing the same job we were expected to do with that shipping container, but we had a few blocks of C4, a rope, and like a good knife, and a carabiner. We would just innovate, and it didn't matter. We don't worry about what the tools we had to leave behind. So now I'm short a couple tools, but I still got this job that I have to do.
I think it's awesome how you sought out people who were already excelling, who had they were blind as well, but yet they didn't give up, and you put yourself in a situation like you didn't call me and be like, hey, I need to learn how to kayak. Could you kind of guide me through this? You picked people who had done incredibly hard things, and yet you wanted to learn from the best in that given field, which I think is phenomenal. It speaks really into you just as a man, and ultimately what has happened since. I know that, again, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago about running marathons. Prior to recording, we talked about you wanting to not just run marathons, but also ultra marathons that you're into now, and which all of that is amazing. But yet I know some other things happened after, like after you had the blindness from the IED blast, you went out and then you figured out life blind, and then you Google plus whatever it was, and then you kind of just kind of made your way through it. But what else happened in your journey? I think in 2015, what else happened in your journey that kind of added another layer to the difficulty?
I was just off of this epic like 4-stop tour where I went to Colorado, climbed 3 14,000-foot peaks in a day. I went to Texas and actually went hunting with a buddy, which is an incredible story all of its own. I had a guy over my shoulder. We used a laser dot and a guy on a IR scope talking us in. It was like a team hunting thing.
That's awesome.
And then I was kayaking with Lonnie in Montana. I had a speech in there as well where I was talking all about learning to deal with life struggles and succeed and triumph over tragedy. I was just back off this trip. I was just dropping my gear in the house. I was on the phone with my new girlfriend, and I was feeling pretty fatigued. In fact, I was so dizzy that I thought I was going to fall over. I didn't know what was happening to me. I told her I'm just going to lay down. It was a pretty big trip. I'm going to lay down, take a nap. I'll call you back. I woke up with, I don't even know how to describe it, the headache, migraine. They don't even do it justice. It was like somebody just poured acid into my head, and it was eating away at my skull. Within moments, I knew that I had to call 911, and the operator answered the call and said, "State the nature of the emergency." I felt a little embarrassed. I said, "Ma'am, I have a really bad headache." And she said, "On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it?" And I said, "Ma'am, I've never felt a pain like this in my life, and I've literally been blown up before."
What was her response?
She
Probably not
said,
knowing whether to take you seriously or not.
she said the ambulance is on its way. And I was soon, the last thing I remember before passing out was the paramedic said, "I'm just going to give you something to help you relax." And the hospital, I live a mile and a half from the hospital, and I was out cold. Next thing I know, my mom is by my side. My girlfriend, who lives in California, was back in Florida where I live, and I thought it had just been minutes. Like, how did you guys get here so fast? But I'd actually been out for 4 days.
Wow.
Or at least I wasn't lucid. They said I was awake, but I was very confused. I was angry at times. I was thrashing. I'd even broken free from my restraints. And they said I had contracted bacterial meningitis. So over the course of the next few days and couple weeks, I was in a fight for my life because the meningitis had attacked my brain, and it was eating my brain. It was killing me. And whether it was the heavy doses of antibiotics or the bacteria itself, even though I survived, it stole what was left of my hearing that the bomb hadn't taken. So I was left not just blind, but 100% deaf.
Wow.
There was a chance that I could regain some of my hearing through cochlear implants, but it would take over 6 months before the first one would start bringing a signal into my auditory nerve. And it was the other side, the right side, where the blast had come from, was the first one that it was more damaged than my left. I heard what far worse beforehand in my right side. They did that one, and they tuned it in, and it didn't work. I mean, I was hearing, it was like static. You know, when you're just outside, the radio signal in your car, you know, like outside the city, and you hear something coming through, but you can't understand what it is. That's what that was. So, man, talk about the demons wanting to come in again.
Yeah. Now, did the meningitis, was it actually there because of your, because of what had happened from previous injuries? Is that the reason? Were the two things connected, or were they disconnected?
Well, we believe it was connected because the cracks in my skull, that I was leaking spinal fluid, they had patched it up, but I'd never stopped leaking. It was just a very small leak of the spinal fluid, and nobody had realized it. So there, what is a pathway out is also a pathway in. It was a direct open channel right to my brain.
Wow.
It was exposed, and meningitis is a waterborne bacteria. So I could have. We don't really know where it came from, but it could have been while I was kayaking.
Right.
Who knows? So there I was in the hospital, and then at home recovering, and for 6 months and longer, I was trapped in my body. I was my whole world ended at my fingertips. I couldn't get a signal out, or I couldn't get a signal in. I could still talk, but I couldn't communicate, which is back and forth. My girlfriend moved in. She left her place in California. She left her job, and she moved in with me, and she nursed me back to health. And she began writing every letter of every word that she needed to say to me in the palm of my hand, which is in itself tedious and frustrating. And at the time, I thought, man, I should have learned Braille. But but it was the only way to communicate. And I can remember thinking, when has one soldier paid his due?
Yeah.
Was one guy had enough? What this really isn't fair.
Mm.
But what's fair? And the fair doesn't exist.
Right.
That's not even a thing. That's a figment of our imagination. That's a made up term, fair.
Hmm.
So again, I just decided, okay, I'm missing some more tools, but I'm still alive. I'm still responsible to my kid. I'm
Mm.
still responsible to my girlfriend.
Mm.
Still responsible to my family. Uh, and I have an opportunity here to, to put uh, the, I'd become a speaker over the years since I'd lost my eyesight. And I tell the story of going blind and then coming back from that and finding success, finding happiness, and doing even more with my life. And here I was
Mm.
thinking about quitting, and I wasn't even, practicing the tenets of what I was preaching.
Wow. That
So,
has to be such a difficult thing too, because then you have to practice what you preach. You just told and inspired all these people, and now it's your time to take your own advice. And that had to have brought on a whole other level of humility, as if you hadn't had all these other trials of humility before that. And yet, what was obviously there's this challenge to humility and the decision ultimately, or many decisions probably daily, moment by moment, of how you overcome this. But what did that look like as far as you trying to progress through this? Obviously you had Michaela there by your side. You said that one of the compelling things is you knew that you had life, so you were accountable to yourself, you're accountable to her, you're accountable to your family, your kids, and to other people around you. But how did all of that get mustered up into being the man that you are today?
well, I believe that's the whole point, is that our lives don't just belong to us.
Mm.
Our decisions don't only affect us.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's so, and that was one of the most important things I learned in the service, is that you don't you don't rush into battle for the pay. You
Mm.
don't rush into battle for yourself. You become the best warrior you can, so that you can be the best for those service members to your left and right.
Mm.
And I wasn't going to give up, not just for me, because frankly, I don't think would have the motivation to do it on my own. I
Mm.
wouldn't. That wouldn't have, just for that selfish reason, it wouldn't have been strong enough of a why. But my
I'm
family
thankful that
certain.
that wasn't for you. I'm thankful that it wasn't some sort of inner selfish resolve that actually brought about the change for you to be the new man that you are today. I'm thankful that you stepped out, that you were able to step outside of yourself and realize, wow, there's actually more to my life than just me. Because if you're to live selfishly, and it's the same for you, Aaron, as it would be for me, if I'm just to live selfishly, I'm just going to be just a great big child. I mean, that's what kids are, right? They are just selfish. Like I've raised two kids, and every child when they're really young is just really selfish. And I've seen a lot of grown men act very selfish and very boy-like. And there's something I think that's compelling about your story is you found purpose somewhere, and maybe you had it the whole time, but it seems like the greater purpose than self was it was a North Star for you, if you will.
Well, I love how it was put in the Book of Joy by Archbishop Desmond Tutu
Mhm.
and the Dalai Lama, uh, where he was in. I think it was the Archbishop was in terrible pain, and he just looked out the window and he could, in his car was being rushed to the hospital. He saw poverty and malnutrition, and
Mm.
just recognizing the pain in others, the empathy in the outside world, and realizing that his was not the only pain out there, made his less and easier to carry, his burden easier to carry. It was a terrific book, by the way. But so there I was, blind and deaf, and maybe there's a sliver of a chance to get my hearing back, but I wasn't going to wait. So I did what anybody in my situation would, and I started a chocolate company.
It seems like a natural transition.
Well,
In some ways, it's coming back home for you, though, because you being a cook, being not just a cook, but you being the quality of a chef, and I think that's different than a cook as far as the way that I look at it anyway. And so it's almost like a coming back to, it's almost a full circle journey for you.
well, that's the thing. It was therapeutic for me. I did
Yeah.
the two things that I knew would make me feel better and that would keep me busy. Because that was one of those things is that being without your eyesight and your hearing, the things you can do are very limited. I couldn't use my phone or my computer, which are audio based. I couldn't listen to audio books or read the news or my email or check Facebook or, anything, watch TV, you name it. When I lost my hearing, I'd also lost my inner ear balance, the vestibular balance.
Mhm.
So I couldn't even go for a walk. I was wheelchair bound for a little while,
Wow.
but I could hold on to the countertop with like a GI Joe kung fu grip, and
I see what you
I
did there.
I could still cook. And then I got on the treadmill, and I just did what do you do, the quick start. It just starts at like 0.5 miles per hour,
Yep.
and I just walked, and it still felt like somebody was trying to rip the machine out from under me,
Hmm.
but I just walked, and eventually that was a slow jog, and then I was running again. um, I took the trekking poles that I brought with me into the mountains, and I learned how to walk again by doing this like extended crab walk thing down to my mailbox and back, which was exhausting. But eventually I was reaching further. I was challenging myself again in many different ways. And I would go down to our neighborhood gate and back. We'd walk around the neighborhood. It was extremely hard. And it was tiresome and exhausting, but I was making progress.
And for
And
you, so
and
then you start walking and you get to the point where you're starting to walk, and now you're able to go to the mailbox with the help of your poles. And to date, what is the longest distance that you have ran?
in 2014, in 2015, April of 2015, I ran the Boston Marathon.
Hmm.
Um, so until then, I'd run, I think, 4 marathons,
Hmm. Wow.
and that was probably the longest distance. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, just from what we talked about before we started recording, and now what are you training for?
Right now, I'm training for a 100-miler. The one that I was registered for had been canceled because of the virus. But by luck, I found one right back in my hometown of Akron called the Canal Corridor. So that'll be in July, running 100 miles on the Erie Canal. And right now, beginning, starting the 1st of May, I'm on a virtual ultra marathon, which is the great, was it the great virtual race across Tennessee.
Hmm.
So it's 1,000 kilometers, but of course, there's an option to do it down and back.
And I know which one you're opting for. Judging by past history, I know which one you're opting for.
So of course I'm doing 2,000 kilometers
Yeah, of course.
on my treadmill, which is about an average of a half marathon or so every single day
Wow,
for 4 months.
man, man, I'll tell you, and if just as an aside, to run on a half or to run on a treadmill for 13 miles one time is incredible, but for you to commit to do it every day, wow, that is something else. I think the farthest I've ran on a treadmill was like 3 miles, and it felt like 30, just because it's just the monotony of it, you know. And
Well, I want to give myself at least a day off. So at least one of the days I'm doing a full marathon.
oh, okay, well that's good. That only makes sense. That only makes sense. Are you all? I almost said something about seeing a psychiatrist, but that may be maybe. Oh, that's great. So now you kind of you put this out there, and now you're a chocolatier, and I know that we're on the backside of the conversation, and I want to be a respecter of your time, but you know how how much chocolate are you guys producing? How can people get the chocolate? It's something that you do. I've gone to the website. I think it's just phenomenal, and it's actually it's not too far from me actually where you make it or where it is made. So give us just the rundown about the chocolate, how we can find it, and all those details too, Aaron.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I got into the kitchen too as a part of therapy, and it was we were coming up on Thanksgiving, and we'd invited the whole family, friends and neighbors. It was going to be a feast,
Hmm.
and I'd thrown myself into this. I'd thrown all of my passion, all my pain, all of it into preparing just something. I wanted to make people happy. I wanted to make my family happy because they were going through this at the same time I was.
Right.
So I started weeks in advance preparing, and I started making desserts, cakes, and pies, cookies, all sorts of stuff. And I would just put them in the freezer, waiting for the big day to take them out.
Hmm.
But I started making fudge, and one batch after another, I was doing a different flavor. I was throwing nuts and spices. I was going to the liquor cabinet, dumping a little in there, uh,
Little here, little there.
and and Mikhail had noticed two things. My girlfriend at the time, my wife now,
Hmm.
she noticed two things. One was that there was uh, um, something she saw in me that she hadn't seen in 6 months, and that was a smile on my face.
Mm.
I was actually enjoying myself. The other thing she was noticing was that um, there were just far too much fudge for one family, to eat in one holiday. So she was sneaking it out the front door to give away to friends and neighbors. And I say sneaking, like got to be real stealthy around a blind deaf guy. But
Right, right, exactly.
people started coming back and saying, "Can we buy more of this from you?" And capitalist in me said, "Well, of course you may." Uh, and that's how we got started. We called it uh, Extraordinary Delights, or EODfudge.com.
Awesome.
So you can find us at EODfudge.com. People can follow us at EOD Confections on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And please check us out. We've got more than just fudge. We've got some pretty incredible stuff there now.
Yeah, that is awesome. And you actually, it's made in Savannah, and I'm in Dublin, Georgia, which is only 2 hours away. So I know a lot of people around my community are going to listen to this. Can you actually go to Savannah to get it, or do you have to order it online?
Well, we're strictly an online shop.
Okay.
So even though I definitely recommend hanging out in Savannah, let us send it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yep. That sounds great. Well, Aaron, I just want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for your candor. I thought this conversation would be a breath of fresh air, and it certainly was. And I can't wait to try some of your fudge. And you and Michaela are an inspiration to us all. And for you to go through the things that you have, and yet to have the mindset, a growth mindset, to walk through it and to find purpose. There's so many things there that we could talk for hours about. And so your message is incredibly compelling. And once again, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yep. It's been my pleasure.